You know, to those on the East Coast who are fans of the alternate music scene, the name Kristen Hirsch means something, and it means something here on the West Coast. It means it's about to become a stage play called Rat Girl at San Francisco's annual Diva Fest. But you may not know a lot about Kristen Hirsch until you hear from our next guest, Stuart Bousel. Welcome.
Hi.
So when did you become fascinated by Kristen Hirsch?
She has a stepsister, Tanya Donnelly, who was part of her band, Throwing Muses, and in like 1992, she went and started her own band. I actually got into that band first, and then found out kind of about Kristen sort of through the back door, as it were. But yeah, so probably since I was about 14 or 15 years old.
Right. Now, I'm going to come out of the closet here. I am not very knowledgeable about the alternate rock scene,
Okay.
but I know reading about Rat Girl and reading Kristen's story, which is tragic and complex and sad
well,
and
she
courageous.
lived and she's happy, so it's okay.
Well, exactly. But I mean, it sounds kind of like a 2013 version of The Rose, almost.
Yeah.
I mean, this woman's been through it.
Yeah, totally. And she went through it when she was 18, 19 years
Yeah.
old, which is kind of the most remarkable part. I mean, I actually didn't know as much about her story until she published a memoir about 3 years ago called Rat Girl. And you know, I bought it thinking it'd be a sort of fun rock star tell-all, and it turned out to actually be this really gut-wrenching, beautiful story
Yes.
about this girl, you know, who in 1 year of her life, you know, signs a record deal, becomes a rock star, finds out she's bipolar, tries to commit suicide, and then gets pregnant with her first child. That's a hell of a 10-month stretch.
Well, yeah, I mean, it's a play waiting to be written.
Well, and that's what I thought too. She has a remarkable ability to capture dialogue, and as I was reading the book, I could really hear the characters speaking, which is to me why it felt like it should be a play and not, you know, I mean, not just a book. So that was the real impetus there.
So does she write like she performs on stage?
Yeah, there's definitely an intensity to it. I mean, the book has been edited. I recently actually interviewed her about the book directly, and we've been corresponding for months, but you know, I got to sit down and just talk to her about the book, and you know, she said that they brought in this person to sort of help organize what was really a diary, a teenage girl's diary, a bipolar teenage girl's diary, no less. So it was poetic.
That's
and
the
lovely.
subtitle of Rat Girl, a
Pretty much.
bipolar teen's diary.
Pretty much, yeah.
I'd pick it up. Yeah.
Yeah, no, why not, right? But yeah, so they had to bring in someone to kind of organize it a little bit because it was very lovely to read, but not always sensical. And then I've kind of taken it, and you know, when you turn something into a play, it changes the nature of the medium anyway. So.
Now, this is part of the annual Diva Fest at San Francisco's Exit Theater. Great reputation. Diva Fest has been going on now, I think you said, for over a decade.
Over a decade, yeah.
What makes this play perfect for Diva Fest?
You know, I mean, it is a story about a young woman. Diva Fest likes to promote work that both offers opportunities for women to work in the arts, but also puts women's voices out into the artistic medium more. Obviously, I'm a guy, but there've always been men involved with Diva Fest, and you know, projects are sort of picked and green-lighted based on the uniqueness of the voice. If it's a voice that hasn't really appeared in the festival before, obviously if we think it's a voice that people will be interested in hearing what that voice has to say. Her story is so utterly unique and also distinctly female in some ways. Like Kristen herself likes to say that she doesn't believe that anyone should Lilith fair things. You know, she really much.
She doesn't think anyone should Lilith fair things?
Lilith fair things. She's always believed. There's a great moment in the book actually where a female reporter says to her, "How come your drummer's a man?" Because it is an all-female band with a male drummer. And she says, well, because Dave's not a woman, and here he is, you know. And she says, well, don't you think you make female music? And she says, not any more than men do. And so she's very much someone who actually, I think would be, you know, well, I know she's fine with me adapting it, but, you know, despite all that, I do think her story is distinctly female because she goes through things that getting pregnant is obviously something only a woman's really going to deal with. And I think right now there's a lot of interest in things like bipolarity, schizophrenia, mental. You know, only really starting to understand mental illness and how it can really affect people and how.
So is her book is it just a rant or is it a cry for help or no?
No, that's a good question.
Is it an attempt to remove the stigma of mental illness?
You know, I think it's just a story, and I think for her that was actually what was most important. You know, I asked her in my own interview with her. I said, what do you want people to walk away from this with? Like, who are you trying to reach? And she said, anybody, and they can walk away with
So
whatever
she's a
they
pure
want
artist.
to. She very much is, and actually that's the most appealing thing about her. I mean, it's sort of a catchphrase, right, in this post-Rent world, but like, she never sold out. She still hasn't sold out. She's still out there putting out her own albums kind of on her own terms, touring under her own banner. She's, had an amazingly successful career for somebody who's never had a record go gold in her entire career, but she's kind of indie rock royalty, really, in a lot of ways.
Indie rock royalty.
Yeah.
And how's the kid?
Well, she has 3 more now, I believe. She's 4 total. He's fine. He's out there. He's like 28. She's got a teenage son who's still at home, and she's been a very successful mother in addition to being a successful rock star. So good for her.
Yeah.
I don't know if I could do it.
Yeah. What would you like people to take away from this? Because I mean, it's, you can write a book and say, yeah, it's a diary and whatever they take away from it. But I mean, a stage play is different.
Yeah.
You got to have an objective.
For us, the 2 themes that we find most interesting is that when she's struggling with her mental illness, she's really struggling with her ability to accept who she is. So a huge part of that story was appealing to me. Everyone struggles to figure out who they are. And probably the second thing is just that she has to learn to let people help her. That's a huge part of the story too, is that she's very much a loner, very independent. She's struggling with this thing. She doesn't let people in to help. And so, walking away from it with an idea of how valuable it is to have a support system, I think is good too.
Yeah. So obviously this is a play about a real person. Her real name is on it. A lot of real people.
Like almost everyone in it is
What does
real.
Kristen think of it? How involved is she?
She is pretty respectful of our process. She's also just come out with a new album, and she's out touring that. So she's not super involved because it's hard to, do both those things. But she is incredibly supportive of it. She's been wonderfully kind. Her whole management team has been. She's very interested in it. She's interested to see what we can do with it. When I approached her with the idea, I think her response was somewhere between, yeah, that sounds great, and I have no idea how you're going to do that. So I think I'm just curious to see how you pull it off, But yeah, she's been delightful to work with, but she's not heavily involved. She really sees this as what we're doing.
Right. Now, I mean, using the word tragic, little t, just in kind of a descriptive sense.
Sure.
What are artists' fascination with these stories of, now I don't want to say self-destructive because.
Why do we keep coming back to that as artists?
Yes.
I think it's because, I would argue that everybody has a self-destructive element to them, Like we all have it in us to some degree or another, right? It just depends on the circumstances, if our life leads us to that point. I think artists maybe are a little bit more in tune with that or aware of that. You're always exploring a wider vista of human emotions. She is in touch with that dark side of her personality, and a lot of her music comes from there. And part of what makes her story interesting is that for years, even as she was writing this music that was making her making her famous and very respected and was her livelihood, she was actually very scared of it because it came from a dark side of her personality.
Yeah.
And for her to make the music was actually almost harmful, like physically harmful, mentally harmful for her. And so learning to embrace her talent was kind of learning to deal with her dark side.
When you've spoken to her, did she talk about which part of herself was creating the music? Which part of her bipolar personality was doing it?
Well, bipolar people aren't necessarily, they don't have split personalities. That's a very different thing.
No, let me rephrase it. That's phrased badly. What I mean by that is when she was experiencing one part of her bipolarity, was she more creative than the other?
She was always, bipolarity is best thought of as fast and slow. You go through fast periods and slow periods. When she was fast pretty much her entire teenage life. And she didn't have a crash until she was about 19, and that's kind of when they figured out something was wrong. Up until that moment, she was highly intelligent and precocious, and this person that everyone found very charming and had bottomless energy and never needed to sleep, and all these things. And all those things can turn out to be symptoms of bipolarity, but you won't find that out until you hit a wall, and she hit that wall and then tried to slit her wrists. So, the music came out of that portion, that period, but, it's been many years since then. She's had ups and downs throughout her entire career, and she's been creative in both sides. I think for her, though, she does tend to associate her best creativity with what she refers to as the evil Kristen side. And she'll say, evil Kristen's music is beautiful, and the worst part about evil Kristen is that the music's beautiful. And when she leaves, she's not sure if the music is as good anymore. So, it is true that when she plays, she's sort of infamous. Like one of her trademarks when she plays is she's almost a different person on stage. And she just played San Francisco a few weekends ago, and someone from the audience even screamed out, you know, you look like such a nice person off stage, you know, which she thinks is funny, but apparently it still very much happens. She gets up there and her...
Yeah, well, I mean, everyone's favorite Star Wars character is Darth Vader. I mean, you know. It's
right,
like,
well, we like the dark side, you know.
We like the dark side, so her music dances with that dark side.
Oh, absolutely. And I mean, recently a song that she wrote was used as the closing credits for American Horror Story. So that's to say something right there.
In the last few seconds, talk to me about the production. Is there a lot of music in it, obviously?
There is and there isn't. There are 6 full songs and a lot of fragments of songs, because the whole point is that the music tends to come in fragments. But yes, there are 6 full songs in the show. And
who is there just one person who portrays Kristen?
There are 2, actually. We do have evil Kristen and good Kristen, and that's kind of part of the fun, you know, of a theater production, is we can do something like that. In a movie, you probably really couldn't get away with it because of the realism element, and in a book, obviously, you know, it's different ideas, but with theater, you get to personify it, which is great.
Great. Well, thanks for coming on the show. I look forward to seeing both the evil Kristen and the good Kristen, and hearing them both at Diva Fest at San Francisco's Exit Theater. Thank you. We've been speaking with Stuart Bousel of Diva Fest and the creative mind behind Rat Girl. I'm David Perry. Thanks for watching 10%. We'll see you next week.